like to introduce you to Dr. Jim, actually Jim Egenrieder. He tells us the doctor will be coming shortly. He is currently on the in the Math and Science Education Department, the School of Education, Virginia Tech, Northern Virginia Graduate Center, and one of his specialties is the integration of math and science. He's doing a lot of observations of teachers as well, and has been really helping us at the National Institute of Aerospace focus in on ways to integrate science, technology, engineering, and math into standards-based curriculum. That'll be the focus for today. Jim, take it away.
Thank you, and welcome to you all. I'm glad you could all participate. We're going to cover a few things today, and hopefully not too rushed. We'll begin with just some starting points, just address some collective assumptions, and then I'm going to talk about educational goals, at least my perspective on educational goals, and give you a chance to react to it. Then talk about what is STEM and what is integrative STEM, how integrating STEM helps us reach our goals, then some strategies, and then give you some guidance on how to reach out and learn more. And of course, as we go through here, if you have questions, don't hesitate to interrupt. You may use the text chat to do so, or raise your hand, and Sharon has offered to be diligent and interrupt me vocally as necessary if I don't see them. So jump right in when you feel the urge. Now, some key points. I want you to all know that I believe you are already integrating STEM. Particularly as science teachers, you may be more likely to be integrating technology, engineering, and math, and many, many other subjects more than other teachers might. This integration provides for some wonderful synergies when students start to think about how all these subject areas that they learn throughout the day suddenly fit into one picture, because ultimately we discover much later in life, when we are most self-directed in our learning, that everything does interact and influence each other, and learning it that way actually has some big advantages. So it truly is beneficial for everyone. But here's the best part. Innovation, big discoveries, all take place at the intersections or the overlap of these disciplines that we've all learned discretely most of our education or most of our lives. Here's the downside. Innovation is messy, so that when we're out there trying to do new things and maybe integrate things we've never intentionally tried before, there will be parts of our curriculum and certainly parts of our classroom or laboratories that are messy, and you just have to accept that about yourself. You may not be able to be both organized, at least 100% organized, and innovative. Most of our discoveries happen when we least expect them, or through error, or through pure accident. And if we're so organized that we've prevented such things, we miss out on a lot of innovation. And then the last starting point for discussion is just to make it clear that as we talk about the importance of integrating STEM, we don't expect anybody to do it all on their own. There is a lot of help out there, and increasingly there's help at a very formal level. In other words, there are people in higher ed, not just us, but people at the universities we represent, who are specifically designing coursework to help you become integrative STEM educators, and we'll tell you a little bit about that. One thing I did want to mention as we move on here, one of the very first slides shows you that this entire slide set is available for download. We want you to find this, explore it on your own. Indeed, there are some slides that we're not going to cover today, especially when we get into some of the pedagogy. I hope that we're not just talking with teachers here, but teacher leaders, at least future teacher leaders, and that you'll use some of the material you learned today and absorb today or reflect on today and share it with others, perhaps in your own presentations. Okay, this is key to me. We are teaching more than specific skills. So we're not just teaching biology, we're not just teaching chemistry, physical science, etc. We're teaching people how to live as fully as we know how. We want them to be able to realize their aspirations. We want them to live to learn, to contribute to others' learning and sense of well-being, and to challenge themselves, to regularly seek new opportunities that stretch them. We want to teach them how to gain wisdom. Those of you who teach 8th, 9th, 10th grades in particular know that many of these young people have a lot of intelligence and maybe right close to the plateau of their intelligence, but they have almost no wisdom. They've not made enough mistakes to know right from wrong, hard from easy, shortcuts from long ways, and they may not recognize the value of many things. We also want these young people to live to make a difference and to touch others' lives in positive, effective, and effective ways. And we also want them to live to have fun so that they enjoy everything they do. We can do all this as science teachers, or math teachers, or English teachers, or language arts teachers, particularly when we discover some of these strategies for integrating science and technology, engineering, and math. Now, I thought it'd be helpful to operationalize some definitions here. And I'm going to use some well-known definitions, but at least here with science, I'm going to share my own favorite. Now, I don't pretend to have ownership of this. It's an amalgamation of many things I've heard over the years, but I think of science as a process by which we answer questions and solve problems, as well as the body of knowledge resulting from that process. Now, Gerhard Salinger, who's one of the more authoritative folks in STEM education, came up with the second definition of science there. Science is the application of human intelligence to figuring out how the natural world around us works. Inquiry is the method used to establish scientific understanding. I'm going to pause here and find out first that I'm not operating on an assumption that all of you teach science. Are there those of you who teach perhaps not only science but other subjects, or maybe not science at all but other subjects? You can use the text chat to do so, or use the microphone. Maybe we are all our science teachers tonight. I'll look for interruptions as we go along. Now, what is math? I wonder if any of you might offer an answer of your own. Practicing good wait time has a whole new meaning in a centric discussion than it does when I can intimidate you with stares and motivating glances. Well, don't think Gerhard Salinger to be the ultimate authority, but I'll share with you his definition. Mathematics is the science of patterns and relationships among real and non-real objects. It's key to understanding and communicating most of science and engineering. Logic is the method by which we establish mathematical knowledge. technology is the modification of the world to meet human needs and wants, and design is the method for developing new and useful products and processes. Might anybody follow Philip's lead there and maybe suggest a difference between technology and engineering? Most of you might guess correctly that they're probably the most closely related.
Or once again, if you have mic capability and you'd like to answer, Jim, if you raise your hand, Michael can relinquish the microphone to you as well.
I like Mark's definition there. Technology is a tool, engineering is a process. I think you'll see that reflected in what Gerhard Salinger says too. There we go. My keyboard wasn't responding. Engineering is also the modification of the natural world to meet human needs and wants, but it differs in that it's more analytic and based strongly on scientific knowledge. Design and redesign, thereby capturing Mark's idea of a process, are the modes of understanding and doing. Good, thanks. I think it's important to operationalize some of those concepts. We may have been students of science our entire lives and never really come up with our own definition. And I hope that you will. I hope that maybe you can use some of what Gerhard Salinger has to say and what I offered for science, but maybe come up with your own definition that you might share with your students. Now, integrative STEM is not so fancy a term after all. It's actually a very nice term. It accomplishes that synergy that we find is so important. It focuses on understanding broad concepts which, when integrated, allow students to focus on problems and solutions without being concerned about crossing over into separate subject areas. I'll pause there. Many of you have probably been in classrooms, leading classrooms, and have heard somebody say, wait, this isn't biology, this is physics, or this is language arts, or this is algebra. We want them to be free of that notion. Continuing, indeed, one can almost make the analogy that this is the way a classical liberal arts education is designed. I like this definition particularly because I believe that an integrative STEM education will be the foundation for new liberal arts education. With data suggesting that 78% of all new jobs in the state of Virginia created last year were STEM related, you can see the importance of having a STEM-centered liberal arts education. And through the integration of these subject areas or disciplines within each other, and then also to the visual and performing arts, to language arts, social studies, etc., you can see how it could truly become the foundation for the future of liberal arts education. So STEM education means that students use the design process to understand concepts and then apply the concepts to the unique situations or problems that they wish to resolve. When I think of successful integration of STEM, I think of four things. One, that it be systematic, that we as teachers have a regular way to make sure that we are reflecting on this notion that I want to show the overlap in other areas of learning. That it be rigorous, that it's not just a cursory reminder that you also study this in chemistry or you also study this in biology, but that we regularly challenge students to test their their own knowledge and notion of those connections themselves. We actually make that part of our classroom challenge or assessment challenge. Relevance, I think, is both the driver and the reward of integrated STEM for a student. They see that when we piece all these things together, all the pieces are relevant. Whereas when we learn them separate from each other, we regularly hear those questions. How will I ever use this? And then finally, this last bullet, cultural, is most important when you consider school change. Whenever we introduce new things, it can be really challenging to get others to jump in. Teachers who've been around for a while have experienced all sorts of trends come and go, and the integration of STEM will be treated as such by some. And we want to make it a cultural component of our schools so that I, as a biology teacher, regularly confer with my math teachers and language arts teachers, wondering what they're talking about in their classes right now, sharing my ideas. They expect me to share my ideas. They don't have to solicit them. And it's not uncomfortable when I share them unsolicited. Now, I wonder if you folks might share a few examples of how you might already be integrating STEM in your classrooms. Or maybe ideas on how you might build it into your lesson planning.
Philip, could you elaborate and tell us what you've tried? It would also be interesting to know if you've had any opportunities to do any team teaching with teachers in other disciplines. Often that's one way to begin that STEM integration.
Philip added that this is his first year trying some of this. Danita, am I pronouncing your name correctly? I'll ask you to correct me if I did not. Says you use the design process for problem solving. Problem-based learning is a terrific way to integrate STEM in just about every aspect of a particular problem. Okay, let me just talk about a few considerations for successful integration of STEM. Make it part of your unit plans. Later in this presentation, I have a hyperlink to an online unit plan template that you might follow. Some of you are already familiar with Understanding by Design or Backwards Planning. I've developed one for my graduate students so that they are actually asked in developing their units where these overlaps might exist in some other areas of a student's day. Make it part of the continuum of learning. So not only are you building a constructivist approach to a specific discipline, say chemistry, but you are also building upon a series of connections to other disciplines. So it is part, this integration with other subject areas is part of the continuum. We already spoke of collaboration, but coordination with higher education is also challenging. I actually believe that higher education is a big part of the problem. The biology department doesn't speak to the chemistry department, and neither speaks to the biochemists. And until that happens, there's less stimuli for it to take place in secondary education. I want to talk about some of the comments that are showing up here. John wrote that he uses science events in his math classes to give validity, and I think that's wonderful, mostly because math teachers are often regarded as the least willing to stray from what might be perceived as a pure form of teaching math and talk about how math fits into the world around them, except in what are often perceived as strictly math problems, or even if they're word problems. Sean added science fair projects. I think in most cases they're often now called science, technology, and engineering fairs, and I won't be surprised if you start to see the word STEM show up there. Eileen, I'm going to address your question about understanding by design very shortly. I'd like you to share with me possibly how you perceive your course to fit in to this Venn diagram. And it will vary. Even if you're a science teacher, you will find that your course might fit into that science circle in different areas. Maybe you have a strong overlap with math, maybe not. Maybe you regularly use technology, maybe you use a little less. Maybe what I'll do first is ask where a chemistry course might fit in.
I know Mark is a chemistry teacher. Mark, where do you see your chemistry course fitting into that Venn diagram? Michael, will you give Mark the microphone, please? Mark, if you hit control, you should be able to make the microphone work, I believe.
Hello?
We hear you now.
Okay. I guess for me it kind of depends on the topic, where it fits the best. First year, when I teach AP chemistry, tends to be kind of a wide-ranging subject. We cover a lot of things. Like today I was talking about properties of solutions. So we talked a lot about like why ice cream freezes.
I'm sorry, Mark, would you say that again, please?
Oh, did you lose? Oh, I'm sorry. It really depends on the subject because chemistry is so wide-ranging at the high school level. It can fit into, I mean, I do a lot of math in AP chemistry. There's a ton of math in AP chemistry. There's some engineering applications. It really kind of depends on what topic you're looking at. I think that's one of the areas where teachers struggle, is that we're really at the kind of the overview core level at high school, especially first level courses, and it's really hard to really put it in one place.
Any others want to comment?
I agree,
on
and
where
that
they see
probably
their course?
to follow on Mark's comments, that will often happen where you'll see those overlaps stronger at different times throughout the year. If you perhaps did a unit on chemical ecology where you were talking about natural materials being replicated for use, whether it's in perfumes or for some other useful material, there's certainly a lot of engineering there that might not appear in other parts of your course. If later on you wish to talk further about this, let's do this. I think this is one of the most insightful things to think about is how exactly your course fits into a model like this. Next, I want to talk about how you might explore the variety of options. Pardon me here, I continually lose the use of my keyboard. Here we go.
Jim, may I interrupt for a
yes.
moment? D, your hand was raised. Did you want to have access to the mic? If so, will you tell me that in the chat? D, if you want access to the mic, would you hit your control button and keep it down and speak?
Hi. No, I just wanted to add that I think I do a lot of integrating of it. I teach middle school, but I teach physical science. Physical science is an excellent vehicle for bringing all those things together. We do fuel cell cars, and we do airplanes, and all kinds of things, and we bring everything together using the technology, the science, the math we need. And it comes together quite well in most cases.
Very good example, I agree. John, in his text chat, talked about the difficulty in reaching out to other teachers, especially new teachers. They often arrive and they're very narrowly focused. There's a lot of intimidation there. They're trying to ramp up and just gain mastery of their own material. And sometimes in order to do that, they shut out some of what would otherwise be considered extraneous. Indeed, it's some of those connections that made them fall in love with history that their students would similarly enjoy. So, looking at this slide about interdisciplinary connections, one useful strategy for working with others would be to simply put up some of those big sheets of paper or use your whiteboard and make a list of all the topics that you feel are addressed by these major subject areas. So just from your own ability, your own thinking, consider whether you could name even 50% of the major subject headings in the table of contents of these textbooks. Then, maybe individually or together, go through the table of contents in these textbooks and just see what's there, and you'll be amazed at the connections that appear. I'm going to move down and show you some examples of some of what I've done specifically in project-based learning that you might find beneficial. I did want to mention entrepreneurship. This is a big opportunity for capturing students' attention and establishing relevance. They recognize that when they recognize that innovation happens at the overlap of these disciplines, they get turned on. They recognize just how easy it might be for them to discover something new and create a niche for themselves and perhaps an opportunity to be rewarded financially. In engaging students, I want you to think about the pedagogies, think about the students as individuals, and try for that differentiation that's so important. Recognize that recent brain research shows us that all students are learning, except in very different ways. And recognize that some students need some things from your classroom and need to be spared of others. They'll need different lighting situations, different levels of sound, and certainly different cultural preferences in whether they work alone or with others, whether they appreciate discussion, or whether they want to be off working alone. Some key strategies that I think are important are reflected here in this slide. Many of you have probably already seen these. If you download the presentation, I'll let you go back and read them on your own. If you click on this diagram of the self-operating napkin, it takes you to a YouTube video that you can watch on your own and demonstrate that you don't need any fancy materials to construct some of these Rube Goldberg machines. The video is of one that was created with simple office materials. Understanding by design. Thanks for the reminder, Sharon. Understanding by design is increasingly popular in school districts, and it began back in the late 90s and with a new version of the Wiggins and McTighe book in 2005. It's a type of backwards design. It simply means figure out where you want to end up. What are the enduring understandings that you want your students to leave with? And then determine what big concepts are part of it, what questions you're going to ask, what the activities and vocabulary and terminology are necessary to get them there. So you establish your goals first and then went backwards. We're currently working on an agenda builder that helps teachers accomplish some of these things. So we'll share that maybe later this year. And I also wanted to tell you that there are some resources online there at that website. That's my old high school biology website, where you can actually pick up some unit plan templates and see some that others have already developed. This takes you through the 5 steps of inquiry. I'm going to move down and start talking about project-based learning and problem-based learning so that we capture some of the real meat of this notion of integrated STEM before we run out of time. Here are some characteristics of project-based learning. I wonder if you see in this list things that you're already doing, distinctions from what you're already doing, and distinctions from the way you were introduced to projects. While you type, one of the first things that has always jumped out to me about project-based learning is the reduced role of the teacher. The teacher really, truly has to think of themselves as a facilitator. They have to be a fire igniter rather than a fire extinguisher. Rather than that someone who is regularly telling you, you can't do things, you shouldn't do things, put the brakes on that, don't go there. Figure out how to make a student successful and how to get them where they want to go, maybe in a slightly safer route or more politically correct route. But be a fire igniter rather than a fire extinguisher. Cooperative learning is indeed, Sean, a terrific way, or I should also say a terrific benefit of project-based learning. Teamwork is important throughout the rest of our lives and our students' lives, and projects are a great way to facilitate that. It's also easier to assess than we may have assumed in the past. Some of the important components of successful project-based learning for me were those regular hands-on experiences producing products that had utility beyond the doer. So in other words, those students are creating, they're doing projects, but they're creating products during that project that has utility beyond themselves. It can be a website. It can be, as in the example shown here in my greenhouse, it could be students creating plants that they give away or sell away. These students actually distributed these to students to take home as Mother's Day gifts in this underprivileged population with which I was working. The Chesapeake Bay Foundation has done a lot of work in restoring shad to the Potomac River, in Northern Virginia. And many of you throughout the state are familiar with shad runs. But they were having trouble getting teachers growing shad successfully in their classrooms because teachers had to regularly sneak in the middle of the night and drop these frozen 2-liter bottles of water into the systems just to keep them cold. Well, my students said, why not develop a way that we can grow the eggs here, hatch them, and then turn the fry over to these elementary teachers? And we actually started working with the heating, ventilation, and air conditioning students to do exactly that. They came back with these chilling systems, and we were able to sleep peacefully at night. We turned a webcam on the thermometer reading, and we could check it throughout the night and not worry about anything going wrong or coming into a smelly mess the next day. This student was, this is almost 5 years ago now, he converted this Volkswagen diesel to run on the French fry grease from the high school cafeteria. He intended on taking the superintendent to his office, but he ran into a little trouble and wasn't allowed to get his driver's license till he was 18. So that part of the project fell through, but nevertheless, it was a great project. I was encouraged to ask Dee for her comment. Did I miss it? I don't see it on the chat. Oh, I see it right above me. Your students designed a hydrogen fuel cell car. That's impressive. I hope that whenever you folks are able to facilitate those kinds of projects, you find the means to share them so that students get a little bragging rights, but also others get a chance to learn. These students monitored the return of coyotes to Arlington. We found that they were in every jurisdiction surrounding the Washington, D.C. metro area except Arlington. So we used some cameras to simply capture their picture. You can monitor a community's resources. These students were testing for E. coli in a stream, and it was through their discovery, they actually questioned the results, and we found out that there was actually a sewage leak. These are the friends of the person who conducted this project. He decided he wanted to learn about apiaries, found a mentor, actually built his own, and produced honey on his first try, but in the interim learned that there are no indigenous honeybees in the United States, and that 50% of all the honeybees that we have in the United States start out with the almond crop in California, and then are shipped by trucks across the country. There are lots of extensions in the fine arts. There are lots of opportunity for the visual and performing arts in your science classes. My students were often tasked with doing interpretive dances to describe what goes on in some of those intercellular processes like mitosis and meiosis. Here are some more criteria for project-based learning. I have the same for aspects of problem-based learning, which differ largely because there are tutorials in problem-based learning. We often have known solutions and preferred methods. There may be some safety concerns. Sharon's going to interrupt, and while she does, I'm going to find an important slide to wrap up with. Thank you, Sharon.
I just wanted to pose a question to everyone. What kind of barriers or challenges do you think there might be in trying to focus on problem-based learning or project-based learning? If you want the mic, if you'll just simply either email me that or raise your hand. You want to text message some of your concerns. But I'm interested in what barriers or stumbling blocks do you think there might be?
While you're typing, I want to say just 30 seconds about competition. competition can be very motivating for some students, and it can be very deflating for the rest. Even our science fairs, which are so important, sometimes create 1, 2, or 3 winners and a whole bunch of losers. So we always need to find ways that we can incorporate all. To capitalize on what Sharon solicited from you, I think here, I'm going to wrap up with this. Sean mentioned the lack of tools to solve problems. Tools, available technology, they are always obstacles, and the money to get some of those things is another problem. I think if you start with an understanding of inquiry, you have a big head start in terms of integrating STEM. I'm reading along with you in the text box.
Jim, take note of John's project. What a great way to integrate different topics.
I agree, very much so. Let me scroll down to one of my last slides here to talk about some of the help out there. As I said, nobody expects you to make these transformations on your own. To the degree that you try on your own, I'm certain you'll be rewarded. But know that the National Institute for Aerospace is a big leader in this regard, and they'll continue to bring resources like this discussion and then more tangible things that you can use in your classroom as well. Virginia Tech is developing courses in these categories that I'm showing you here. They actually now have new degree programs, including a graduate certificate, though it's only 12 hours, and a great way to enhance your resume as well. Please know that I am always interested. I wish I was always interesting. I'm always interested in action research, in cooperative research, and doing things with you in your classrooms. Philip, there are ways that you can use that understanding by design approach to accomplish some of what can be very difficult in setting up those expectations. In fact, one of my graduate students, who's also an Arlington teacher there with you, is working on that very thing where they give students their own version of a backwards planning model, so the students monitor their own progress toward an agreed upon goal. Here's how to reach me. Jim E at vt.edu or jim@deepwater.org. There's my cell or text. My cell phone doesn't work on my farm where I spend most weekends. Don't ever hesitate to call any of those numbers.